Hello, this is Father Rich. I'm here in my sitting room in the rectory. By the entertainment center a little bit, one of the CD towers that I have. And in these towers, I have a couple of them. I have a lot of soundtracks, Christian music, and classical music, which has been the stuff that I've listened to more in my adult life. But I do have one case, this CD case, of some of the old classic albums that I listened to back in high school and college. And right at the top of them, my favorite album, which I was very excited to see this was included in the masterpieces. It's U2, The Joshua Tree, 1987. They're sold over 25 million copies. So obviously climbed the charts, had a number of great singles that went to #1. Really brought U2 to the international fame that they still have. I remember in the early 2000s when I was listening more to just Christian music and soundtracks and other classical stuff, kind of looking back at the secular stuff and saying, you know, what band would I consider my favorite? And I was asked that by some of the young people. And just looking back at U2, knowing the impact in high school that they had on me and still being relevant to that point. They had just come out with All That I've Left Behind, with songs like Walk On and Beautiful Day. I said they're still creating these great songs, so I at that point said they're my favorite band, have stuck with it. They actually in 2017 had on the 30th anniversary of this album, actually did a Joshua Tree tour where they just went around and played the whole album. I got to see that in June of 2017 in Pittsburgh, which was awesome, and had a chance to see them in Chicago. A few years later, I saw them in Chicago when I was in college as well. So the one band that's really I've followed. But they have a lot of spiritual themes. They come from a Christian background. 3 of the 4 members still claim to be Christian at their core, including Bono, their lead singer. So the Joshua Tree has songs like Where the Streets Have No Name. Of course, you know, some believe that is a statement about heaven. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, so a kind of a sense of searching, as well as the songs like The Kingdom Come, With or Without You was one of those big singles that went #1. And but then they go on. They said that a big part of the influence of that album was they were kind of wanting to make a statement about the United States. They had a lot of respect for America and appreciated the culture and kind of an admiration, but yet a lot of concerns about it. And so, and as you'll find that U2 has done throughout their career, they're not afraid to kind of make statements about injustice and areas that they want to see justice brought. And Bono is the kind of the ringleader with that in many ways. So they have songs like Bullet, The Blue Sky from the Joshua Tree, which is an indictment of the American foreign policy, driven more by greed than idealism. In God's Country explores the myth of America, so promised land, a promise many find unfulfilled. So there definitely is some negativity as well as some reinforcement of the beauty. They do mention Running to Stand Still. It mourns the damage done by an epidemic of heroin in their hometown of Dublin. Red Hill Mining Town, a protest song in the cause of the UK miners' strike. The Haunting Mothers of the Disappeared, written to honor a group of mothers whose children have been victims of the civil war in El Salvador. One of the most moving songs on the album is One Tree Hill, a memorial to a close friend who had died in a motorcycle accident. The song describes the thoughts that drifted through Bono's mind during the funeral. So they mention here that what emerged from their recording sessions, a record that today is widely considered one of the best rock albums of all time, as well as being one of the best selling with over 25 million copies, as I mentioned. So really kind of a great testament to this album. They go on to talk about their career and how, you know, they kind of, this album, Joshua Tree, was more of a mainstream move into a sound that was probably a little more mainstream. But then after that, they quickly got into the 90s, a lot of experimentation with sound and did a lot of different stuff that wasn't mainstream, but still was popular. And then in the 2000s, they kind of returned to their 1980s sound, some of the original things that had, gained them fame. So in the to 2000s, like I said, All That You Can't Leave Behind, How to Dismantle Atomic Bomb, No Line on the Horizon, and Songs of Innocence. I mentioned that Songs of Innocence was based off of that play, or the poetry, by, I think it was John Donne maybe, on one of the masterpieces. So, and I hadn't realized that before going through this book. So they talk about that there's a lot of biblical and spiritual imagery in their music. Sunday Bloody Sunday, Pride, Silver and Gold, Running to Stand Still. They all have biblical references. They said that there's over 50 scriptural references in their songs. That one critic kind of went through and found those. They do try to also tackle things like racism, the Irish troubles, war, drug addiction, social injustice, in the midst of which they posit a hope that arises from a connection to God. So again, Bono particularly, they actually played for Live Aid, and they talk about how they did a 14-minute version of the song, I think Bad, and Bono got down in the crowd and was dancing with people, and that really kind of brought a stamp in the late 80s to like their popularity, because that was a big deal. Bono says this about his spirituality: I'm not a very religious person. I'm uncomfortable in churches because the Christ I love and read about in the Gospels is often not in churches. Remember, I come from Ireland and I've seen the damage of religious warfare. I am a believer. I don't wear the badge on the outside, but on the inside. He continues talking about grace and karma, which I thought was pretty... He has a lot of depth and a lot of, he's read a lot. At the center of all religions is the idea of karma. What you put out comes back at you. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And yet along comes the idea called grace to upend all that. Love interrupts, if you like, the consequences of your actions, which in my case is very good news because I have done a lot of stupid stuff. They go on to say grace, Bono says, is not an excuse for stupid actions, but he is holding out for grace. I'm holding out that Jesus took my sins onto the cross. So, it talks about how he relates to David and the struggles to live these things out, but yet loves the Psalms, those great songs that really, he sees as kind of the blues, songs of praise, being honest with God, in that the doubt and uncertainty sometimes found in the U2 songs only make their spirituality all the more convincing. So, great stuff. I was, again, just very excited that this was the masterpiece, number 72. So thank you for joining me. Our next one will be number 73, Paradise Garden, which is an artistic assemblage from 1990 by Howard Finster. We're getting close to wrapping up with 75. Thank you again for joining me. Have a great day. God bless.